May 2010. Long Island, New York. A terrified young woman named Shannon Gilbert vanishes into the salt marshes of Oak Beach. She was a daughter, a sister, and an escort who made a frantic 23-minute call to emergency services before disappearing into the dark. At the time, the police thought it was just another tragic missing person case. They had no idea they were about to stumble upon a graveyard. 7 months later, December 2010. A police canine unit is conducting a routine training exercise along the desolate Ocean Parkway. The dog catches a scent. Not of a living person, but of something long gone. Buried in the brambles, just feet from the road, the officer finds a burlap sack. Inside, the skeletal remains of a woman. But the horror was only beginning. 2 days later, 3 more bodies are found. Then another, and another. 4 women, all found within 500 feet of each other, all wrapped in the same heavy camouflage burlap, all strangled. The media called them the Gilgo 4, but as the snow melted and spring arrived in 2011, the body count kept rising. A skull, a toddler, a man in women's clothing. By the time the search was over, 10 sets of remains had been pulled from the sand. This wasn't just a crime scene. It was a serial killer's dumping ground. The victims weren't just escorts. They were someone's world. Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. They all disappeared after going to meet a client from Craigslist. And then, the killer started playing games. Melissa's teenage sister started receiving calls from Melissa's own phone. It wasn't Melissa on the line. It was a man. Calm, cold, taunting her. He told her he had killed her sister and described what he did. He was calling from the middle of Manhattan, the busiest place on Earth, and yet, he was a ghost. For over a decade, the case went cold. Theories exploded. Was it a corrupt cop? A wealthy doctor? A neighbor? For 13 years, the Long Island serial killer lived among us, went to work, and ate dinner with his family, all while the burlap sacks rotted in the marsh. But every killer leaves a footprint. And in 2023, a single piece of discarded pizza crust would finally blow the gates of hell wide open. For 13 years, the Long Island serial killer was the ultimate boogeyman. The FBI, the NYPD, and the Suffolk County Police were chasing a ghost. They looked for a monster in a dark alley. They looked for a hermit in the woods. They never expected him to be sitting in a high-rise office on 5th Avenue, wearing a suit and designing buildings. Meet Rex Heuermann, a successful Manhattan architect, a father, a husband, a neighbor who complained about his lawn and took the train to work every morning from Massapequa Park. To his colleagues, he was a bit of an oddball, gruff, large, and overly professional. But behind the blueprint was a predator who used his knowledge of the city's infrastructure to hide in plain sight. The breakthrough didn't come from a dramatic shootout. It came from a Chevrolet Avalanche. In 2022, a new task force revisited the witness statements from 2010. A pimp had mentioned a large, ogre-like man driving a first-generation Chevy Avalanche when one of the victims, Amber Costello, vanished. Investigators ran the data. Only a few men in the area owned that specific truck. One lived in Massapequa Park, right across the bay from where the bodies were dumped. The police began a shadow operation. They watched him buy groceries. They watched him at his office. They waited for him to make a mistake. And then, he got hungry. In January 2023, Rex threw a half-eaten pizza crust into a trash can outside his Manhattan office. Undercover officers swooped in like vultures. They didn't want the pepperoni, they wanted the DNA. The lab results were a 100% match. The DNA from that pizza crust matched a male hair found on the burlap sack used to wrap Megan Waterman back in 2010. The architect's secret was out, but as they dug deeper into his digital life, the horror reached a new level. Investigators found hundreds of burner email accounts. On his computer, over 200 searches related to the Gilgo Beach investigation. He wasn't just a killer, he was a fan of his own work. He was watching the police, watching the victims' families, and planning his next move. When the FBI finally raided his dilapidated family home, they found something that made even veteran officers sick. A secret, soundproofed room in the basement, a massive collection of 92 licensed firearms, and a digital manifesto, a checklist of how to torture, how to kill, and how to avoid getting caught. The architect hadn't just built buildings. He had built a life designed to facilitate murder. For a decade, the media called them prostitutes or Craigslist escorts. They were treated like footnotes in a police report. But these women weren't just statistics. They were daughters, mothers, and sisters who fell through the cracks of a broken system. There was Maureen Brainerd Barnes, the young mother from Connecticut who just wanted to buy her daughter a birthday gift. Melissa Barthelemy, the aspiring hairstylist who dreamed of the big city. Megan Waterman, a mom who loved her toddler more than life itself. And Amber Costello, who was trying to beat her demons. They were vulnerable, they were targeted, and because of their lifestyle, their disappearances were initially met with a shrug by the authorities. But as the years dragged on, a disturbing question began to echo through Long Island. How did an ogre-like man with a distinct truck and a trail of digital breadcrumbs stay invisible for 13 years? The answer might lie behind a blue wall of silence. Enter James Burke, the then chief of police. While the Gilgo Beach investigation was at its peak, Burke was busy with his own crimes. He was later imprisoned for beating a suspect who stole a duffel bag from his car, a bag allegedly filled with sex toys and pornography. But the real scandal? Burke reportedly blocked the FBI from helping with the Gilgo Beach case for years. He kept the feds out of his backyard. Why? Was he protecting the department's image, or was he protecting someone closer to home? Rumors swirled of high society sex parties in the gated community of Oak Beach, the very place where Shannan Gilbert disappeared. Witnesses claimed to have seen powerful men, including law enforcement officials, at these gatherings. For years, the families of the victims accused the police of a cover-up, claiming the investigation was intentionally hobbled to protect one of their own. While the police department was mired in internal scandals and power struggles, Rex Heuermann was hiding in plain sight. He was literally living in the backyard of the investigation. He was using the same burner phones, visiting the same areas, and even calling the victims' families to taunt them. The system didn't just fail these women. It gave their killer a 13-year head start. In 2020, a single piece of evidence was finally released to the public, a black leather belt found at the crime scene. It was a taunt from the police to the killer. But by then, the trail had grown cold. Or so everyone thought. July 13th, 2023. The world watched as the architect of Massapequa Park was finally led away in handcuffs. But for the families of the victims, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new nightmare. Because as investigators tore apart Rex Heuermann's life, they realized that Gilgo 4 might have just been the tip of a much larger, much darker iceberg. Rex wasn't just a local killer. He was a traveler. He owned property in South Carolina and Las Vegas. In 2024, the investigation took a chilling turn. Prosecutors officially linked him to a fifth victim, Sandra Costilla, a woman killed in 1993. Think about that timeline. If Rex started in 1993 and wasn't caught until 2023, we are looking at 30 years of predatory behavior, 30 years of hunting, 30 years of knowing exactly where the police weren't looking. During the pre-trial hearings, the world got a glimpse into the mind of a monster. Prosecutors revealed a how-to guide for murder found on Rex's computer. It contained categories like supplies, targeting, and lessons learned. He wasn't just killing for a thrill. He was optimizing his crimes like an architectural project. He wrote about the need to use heavier burlap and noted how to avoid leaving DNA. And what about his family? His wife and children claimed they knew nothing. They were away on vacation during the dates the victims disappeared, a pattern Rex used to turn his suburban home into a temporary kill zone. While they were at the beach or visiting relatives, Rex was allegedly bringing women into their home, leaving behind secrets buried in the very walls they lived in. As of early 2026, the legal battle continues. Rex Heuermann remains behind bars at the Suffolk County Jail, facing multiple counts of first-degree murder. He maintains his innocence, but the mountain of DNA, cell site data, and the infamous pizza crust tell a different story. Gilgo Beach is no longer just a place of beauty. It is a monument to the lost girls. It is a reminder that monsters don't always hide in the woods. Sometimes they commute to Fifth Avenue and design the buildings we walk past every day. The burlap bags are gone, the marshes are quiet. But for the families of the 10 victims found along Ocean Parkway, the search for the full truth is just beginning. The architect of death built a life of lies. But in the end, it only took one small piece of evidence to bring the whole structure crashing down.